We're moving towards a time where people can focus on what they want to focus on.
The more, especially we use AI every day to write code and all that, and like some of it, there are moments where it feels like, oh my gosh, like this is, why would I be needed? Will AI mean that there is now the potential of like a one-person, $1 billion company in the future or something like that? And it's like, maybe.
There's a lot of imposter syndrome when it comes to being a, let's say, non-developer background, getting into developing with these tools. You think you can't do it, and you can't.
The stuff we can do with AI now is not just a prototype like it was a year ago. Like a year ago, even at Webflow, we had product designers prototyping the product internally, which was cool, but again, none of it was wired up.
You can genuinely, truly build real production stuff. Guys, the marketing site that our company relies on was entirely vibe coded. It's been live now for over a month. That's a prototype.
That, for me, recently is where my passion has like really been set on fire, almost back to like when I found Webflow. We still need to be there. We still need to be that infinite context window, that guiding light to empower the models to actually execute at a caliber that is indistinguishable from some human pushing all the pixels to make it look that way. You know, how many times have I said it now? It's like exciting times, but like it really is. It's so exciting that it's hard to even like step back every day and recognize what's happening before our eyes.
Corey, thank you so much for joining me. For anyone who's watching, if you don't know who Corey is, I'm just going to give Corey a second here to introduce himself.
What's up, y'all? Stoked to be here. I'm Corey Moen. How do I position myself these days? I don't know. I think just like brand designer, web developer. I'm based in Des Moines, Iowa. Just a, I don't know, Midwest dad with a couple kids. I worked at Webflow for about 5 years, and then this past fall made the transition over to working on the brand team at Anthropic. And so I think just especially Julian, all the content on the MemberStack channel recently around just like what's happening in our industry and all that is just, for me, obviously very relevant and exciting, but also terrifying in some ways if I'm real. And I think, yeah, beyond that, I'm just like forever a passionate nerd about this industry in general. I think I got into it way back in like high school and all that 20 some years ago around like video games and getting into, you know, oh my gosh, how do we make these things that I enjoy playing and using so much? And then that somehow led into graphic design and then web design and then even now more development and getting into code and all that. And grateful that we have tools like Webflow and Claude or whatever to help us do those things. So yeah, man, stoked to be here and to chat.
I was actually just about to ask how you got started. Something I've noticed in the entire, I guess, Webflow ecosystem as a whole, everyone usually has a pretty cool story for how they got started in the first place. I'm going to try to keep mine super short, but basically I was making like designs and like skins for Roblox when I was like, I really started into it, dude. People are still playing Roblox. I can't believe that. I'm pretty young, by the way. I don't know if you knew, but I'm 24. So
whoa, I did not know that.
Yeah, nobody
That's
knows.
Awesome.
Dude,
Yeah.
If you look at my forehead, I don't know if you can see it on camera. I'm a 24-year-old with wrinkles, but like started out with Roblox, dude. And I was like, all right, I gotta start, you know, thinking about like jobs and stuff, things I want to do in the future. And I really just wanted to be able to live where I want. And so I'm like, it has to be something online. I like design. What should I do? And I got into graphic design originally. Funny story, dig into too much, is I was like the lead graphic designer at a prison in California. There were a bunch of rappers, like just rappers that made music, and I did cover art for artists. That was like the first thing I did for money on the internet. And I connected to this guy who was like serving life in prison. He was a rapper. And somehow the word got around, and I had like 5 clients that were in prison. I don't think I've ever said that on camera before, but
this is so awesome. I love that.
That's how I started originally. And then I'm like, okay, you know, I was making like $20 per like cover art for a song, right? I'm like, okay, I want to make, you know, like $300 for a website. Started making websites, very basic. One thing led to another, got into UX design and all the other stuff I've explained on camera like a billion times. But yeah, man, I was the lead graphic designer at a prison when I was 13.
So cool, 13. Oh my gosh. I think it says so much about, again, passion and just like genuine interest, and also like vulnerability, willing to just try, which I think maybe is ironically a great even tie into what the world we're living in today, of even just like you have to be a little open and vulnerable to just like try to use these latest tools and all that. And like also I love the point even in your first job or early jobs, like I said, for me, I found I was big into like gaming and all that. Like I literally in high school thought I was gonna maybe be a professional gamer. Like original Xbox Halo 2 was like my game. Like
Oh yeah.
I played Xbox Live till for like 8 hours a day. It was absurd. But then I ended up finding these like classes in school called computer graphics that were actually just learning like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and like with like tutorial books and all that. And like my moment of like, oh, I really enjoy this was just like the classes would like blip by. Like I'd like get into it and an hour would be gone in like 5 minutes. And long story short, then I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do this and you know, go to college or whatever. And then what's funny, even in the first job thing, is like my first job kind of, I guess, in the industry, I started as an intern and then ended up working there full time for like 2 years, was a industrial pump company in the same in the same city where my college was. It was IDEX Corporation was like the bigger corporation. Then Viking Pump was one of their own pump companies that I actually worked out of the office of. And like, dude, nuts. Like, because especially in this day and age, when you've done this for long enough, you end up working on projects that you see out in the wild, you're like proud or excited, right? And like my first moment of that was I live in Iowa, so again, we don't have oceans or anything, but we have rivers. I grew up, on these like water skiing and these crappy little ski boats that my family had, and we were on the river. And there was this big cruiser that was like, filling up with gas at the gas dock. And also people that live in boats, just like if you have a camper or whatever, you have to use the facilities in the boat and then pump all of that out. And the pump on the gas dock that was being used to do just that, pump poop out of a boat, was one of the brands that I worked on like at that job. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I know that brand. I did the website or the brochures. It's like so funny. But I mean, when I was an intern there, my day to day was like 8 hours a day formatting data sheets for these pumps. So think about like you buy an appliance, a microwave, whatever, and it comes with like black and white paper booklet. No one reads all the technical specs and all that kind of stuff. I literally had to format those and then do it in like 10 some languages. Like that was the first time I learned that like Arabic is written right to left instead of left to right and stuff like that. And it was like so tedious, but look, I learned so much in the monotony of that, and then just following skills and passion to be on it. So I'm such a fan of these like stories and like how people got into it, because it says a lot too. Like if it was something that maybe was exciting or not, but you stuck with it and it was just the entry level, right? Like, I don't know, super interesting.
And going from working on like it's so true, just working on random things, and then when you see them in public, like my first job as well, it was at some agency in Toronto. I was 15; they had no idea I was 15. Very, very
I
funny.
mean, you pull off the older age look for sure.
Dude, I was super skinny back then, and it made my
Yeah.
face look older. So picture this: it was a contract job. My last day, they're like, "Julie, you want to come out for drinks with us? It's your last day and stuff." I'm like, "Oh no, I can't." And I'm just working, and they're like, "Oh, what? You're too good for us?" I'm like, "No, I can't." They're like, "You don't drink?" I'm like, "Well, I do, but I can't go out for drinks, you know?" No, no. And the age of whatever it's called in Canada is 19. So they're like,
Yeah.
18. I'm like, no. Like, you're 17? No. And then I was like, I'm 15. They didn't believe me. I took out my like learner's permit, driver's license. They passed it around. My boss is sitting across from me. They're like, Brian, why'd you hire a 15-year-old? He's like, I didn't know. It's illegal to ask in Canada, at least.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But I relate to what you said, because I was working on like, it was this basically like kiosk UI for like educating people about this like credit union's products.
Right.
And I just thought it was like the coolest thing in the world. I was working like a couple like grandmas walking into a bank are going to see. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing. And looking back, that was such, at least in my career, like such a nice time. It was so innocent and fun to just really go from like working on random stuff to things that real large companies are actually using. Something
Totally.
question that brings up a question in my mind is like, hey, dude, so when we were juniors, the path made sense. It's like, okay, you get a design internship, get a little bit better, you become a junior designer and all this stuff. Um, how would that even look now? Like, how do you think it would look for someone starting their career in design in 2026?
Oh my goodness. I think my brain goes two different ways that are like of potential that are maybe good and bad. I think one is and I have utmost respect for the education system and people that work in it, to be clear. I think though the observation I've had from knowing people that work directly, they are teachers or in education, or like I've also done some like simple like presentations for like design students at colleges around here a couple times, and I've come to this realization, not to generalize, that at least in the US, our education system is usually quite behind the trends, quite behind the edge of where the industry's at. Just to paint an example, is like most of the students I've met in the last couple of years, or teachers that are anywhere adjacent to design, they don't teach or know Figma at all. Like Photoshop, Illustrator, maybe Sketch if you're lucky. And so I think, even your reaction is like anybody that is working in agencies or especially tech or any of that, like in any adjacent design role, is at least aware of or every day uses something like Figma as like the latest tool for especially digital design. But it's really going beyond that. I know so many people that are doing like brand work, that even a couple years ago, like my really good buddy Seth runs a brand studio. He's just an epic designer, and like a few years ago I showed him Figma and he was a little apprehensive, but now he uses it for everything, including illustration and all that. So anyways, I think there's that side, that I think those kids getting into it now are maybe they're missing a massive opportunity to learn some of these latest tools like Figma, but also again like AI and how those tools can be used. But then I think the other side of this is the kids that not necessarily that they might still be going the traditional education route and discovered on their own, but there's also those that just don't and see what's happening on social media, what people are talking about, are really in tune with all the latest things that are being posted on the web. Like I've definitely met people in the Webflow community that ironically, like your story, are much younger than you would expect, especially from what they post on social, like high talent, high taste. You would never expect that they're like under 20 and they're like running their own studio and shipping like pretty solid brands and sites, right? And so like I think those are the ones that, man, getting into really using especially AI tools and all the leverage that they give you around writing code and all that this early are I think probably set up to be absolutely lethal as like a person to bring value to companies and teams in the next 5 or 10 years, especially, right? Because like not to go like too quickly and deep down the whole like what's AI doom gloom or what the next few years are going to look like, but I guess my general position at this moment in time, which the industry's moving so fast, I feel like my and most of our perspectives on it probably changes every month or less. But I think it's still ultimately a tool, and like while yes, there's maybe some jobs that are at risk of replacement or whatever, I think there's still always going to be this world where like the people that really are using it to its fullest and capabilities and staying up on what's possible are the ones that are going to be creating things we can't even imagine maybe in 5 or 10 years. Or like you've maybe seen on socials the like murmurs of, will AI mean that there is now the potential of like a one person $1 billion company in the future or something like that? And it's like, maybe, I mean, like there's already companies before all this AI hype that are a small handful of people. Like one that always comes to mind, I think, is Craigslist, right? Isn't it like 10 people or something at this point, but it's like hundreds of millions of dollars in value. But again, it's like scrappy still and like not polished UI and all that, but that's just them, And so like all this to say, I think there's a massive opportunity. Even just my own children, to be clear, 7 and 3, so very young, but like my 7-year-old, his name's Otto. He is already so like we try to be cautious about how much iPad time or whatever, but like you can tell how quickly he picks up stuff. Even just using an iPad at school or sometimes at home, and then like because of my gaming history I mentioned earlier, like I am already really suckered into like playing Nintendo Switch or games, video games with him, and he picks things up so quick. And so, oh yes, let's go for sure, for sure. And then so I've started to tease Claude, like just in moments where it's like we have a question, we're not sure an answer, and like simple things like that. There's been a couple moments of like we can't decide what to book to read at bedtime, and I'm like, like what if Claude just makes up a book for us? Let's see how that goes. And he's like a little both like, no, that's not a thing. And then at the same time, when it happens, he's just like, you can tell again, like, wow, okay, interesting. And so I don't know, man. I by no means is the type that my wife and I very much try to lead out of this position of like, let them discover. And if they ask or are interested, we will provide, but we don't want to ever force feed, like, you're going to use Claude every day until you're, building apps at age 9. No. But like, if he gets into it, sure. Like, I don't know. So anyways, way long-winded. It's just, I think there's so much potential ahead in all of this. I think the biggest risk, if I can close the question out, is even just like, will us as adults and teachers and governments and communities actually be able to meet the moment to help guide the youth in all of this? You know what I mean? Like, because I don't think we can even make sense of it. So how can we make sense of it for the next generation? I don't know. Deep.
We can't. And that is why, like you said, these school systems, it's a system. It's a large system with a lot of people, and it's very high stakes what you're teaching children. And so I understand why they lag behind, but naturally they do lag behind. So I was born in 2001. That means I grew up in a world where like I learned the alphabet on a computer. I learned how to do everything that I do today for work. And I'm like, I can Google anything. I can go on YouTube and get any information that I want. I dropped out of high school, and for me, it's a great decision. Not that I recommend people to do that. Depends on you. I don't
100%.
I don't recommend it. But at this point in time, looking and saying these kids that are growing up today have access to a personalized tutor to give them any information that they want at any point in time. Like you said, that can really go, one of two ways. And I think for parents, it is not an easy thing to navigate. Also with the screen time, my wife and I were talking about this yesterday.
Totally.
Trying to figure out like what's the balance and all that. So it's difficult not to talk too much about parenting. Yeah. No idea how this actually have kids. I'd love to talk to Corey specifically about parenting in an AI world.
Yeah. Next episode.
Opened up a can of worms that I'm afraid we're going to have to take that lid off. And that is AI taking people's jobs. Obviously, everyone talks about it. It's top of everyone's mind, especially if you work in the creative or development spaces. And I have a take on that and the whole, like, can one person build $1 billion company? I'm going to share it with you. I'm interested to see what your take. Essentially, here's the thing. Think about writing. There was a time when like nobody could write. Everyone was illiterate, and like one person in the town was able to write anything. That person, picture that like your software developer from 2016. It's like, this guy can write. This guy can communicate to a computer. Nobody else can. You obviously got this status, which is super cool. But then education starts to become more prevalent. People start learning how to write. And we live in a world right now where, at least in most of the developed world, most people can write coherently, perfectly fine. That being said, how many jobs are there in the writing space in something so many people, if not everyone, could do? I'm a great, fine, okay writer, I guess. I would happily and do pay writers to do things, because here's the thing, and this is where this relates. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if anyone can do anything. They don't. For example, dude, people, now anyone can make a website. Anyone can make an app. Anyone's been able to make a website for like 10 plus years, dude. Wix.
Totally. Squarespace, yeah.
But they don't. That's the thing. And at the same time, you have people who, for example, my dad built my mother's company a website. He can make a website. He's not a web designer. He's not a professional web designer. And so the way that I see this going, this is my positive take, but also I think the most likely take is we're moving towards a time where people can focus on what they want to focus on. What interests them. Because at the end of the day, if you don't care about websites, you're not going to be able to look at a website and say, this sucks or this is better. And you're not going to be able to, whether it's in Webflow, whether it's with Claude Code, whatever it may be, you're not going to be able to improve it. I could build like the worst slop of a like one prompt website ever, show it to my mother, and she's going to be like, oh, this looks great. But if I show it to you, you're going to say, well, this looks like slop, and you're going to know how to improve it. And so I think there's a lot of like fear mongering going around, like AI for jobs. The thing is, there have been numerous giant leaps. For example, accountants and bookkeepers, man. Think about this. 20, 30 years ago, they were like writing in a literally keeping books. That's where the name came from.
Right.
We have computers that can calculate all of this stuff and algorithms and all this stuff. Are bookkeepers obsolete? No, absolutely not. They've adapted to these tools and they're able to do more. That's the future that I see this is going in. So do you think your job anytime?
Yeah. I think, man, I generally align with that take. Like, I think there's so much to be said about like we've always natural evolution of societies have always just increased optionality is like, I guess, a way that it makes sense in my brain of like even something silly I often say, even with my team when I was still at Webflow and all that is the more, especially we use it AI every day to write code and all that, and like some of it there are moments where it feels like, oh my gosh, like this is why would I be needed? But I think, and then I always joke that like it's fine, when AI takes my job, I'm going to start a robot lawn care company, because here in the Midwest we like grass and fields and things. But here's the reality: is like, as long as people have had lawns and then lawnmowers came around, and even now you can go buy lawnmowers that do it themselves, or you don't even have to, like, they're electric. You just put a battery in and charge it like your phone and it just goes. It's so easy to use. Anybody can do it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have lawn care companies, right? Like, exactly to your point, no one wants to do the effort, or adversely, like they want to be presented in a certain way, like with a website, professionally or not, and recognize somebody else can do this much better. No matter what tools they use to do it, they don't really care. They just don't want to do it, and they want it to look good. So I think that's forever going to exist. I think in the same realm as like SaaS in general, I think we'll probably see the same thing. Like, sure, there's going to be people that want to save a buck and they feel very determined to go make their own website or their own bookkeeping accounting tool and just have AI build it and host it, and they can fully control it and do whatever they want. That's awesome. That is so empowering. But that doesn't mean that the vast majority would want to even go to that effort, even if it's only one or two prompts. There's still, like, I think another layer there of uncertainty, right? Like my own experience with AI, especially in the last, I would say, year, of like maybe 2-3 years ago is when I started, I think a lot of us started using AI to write, like, especially for the Webflow community, like, write me some JavaScript to do something I can't do natively in Webflow, right? And it started early on. I remember so much of like, because it took me, I'm not formally trained in front end or code in general. I've just learned it over the years, right? And JavaScript has always, what I would say, especially like 5, 6, 7 years ago, was the part that was I just struggled learning the most. And I still would say I'm no like full expert today, but I'm very comfortable today reading most, especially vanilla JavaScript, to be clear, not a React Pro or anything. And so a few years ago using AI, it felt like I really had to like handhold it to get it to do the right thing and not write just completely hallucinated syntax and all that. Whereas today it's like, as long as I'm clear on my first prompt on everything that needs to happen and have, like, especially in Webflow, all the attributes or anything set up and structure set up as I know I would probably do it if I wrote the JavaScript myself to do some custom thing, it's usually like one hit. Like, it's just done. Everything's working. It's interesting to see how that has evolved. But even though it's easy to do, and the more I do it and the more it is one shot, it still takes me a lot of time to trust that it's right, especially at scale, right? And so what I'm getting at is, like, I think it's going to take, even if 6 months from now anybody can just one shot a new accounting app on that same general topic, are people going to actually trust that it's legit and that it's not like going to hallucinate their numbers and metrics and things that are like quite vital to get right? I don't know. I would venture that the majority is going to take a lot longer for them to use it consistently enough to know that it's there and works. Like, even to draw another simple analogy, or like you mentioned writing too, man, I've had a goal for years. I updated my portfolio the last time, like actually overhauled it like 3 or 4 years ago. And I just recently unhid and published my first like blog post that I've wanted to do forever. but I just struggle to like sit down and write. But at the same time, I have this like long running list of ideas of things I've always wanted to communicate, and just finally gave in basically to working on having Claude help me write, but then do it in my voice and blah blah blah. Long story short, the first thing I posted was this general analogy of like curiosity that like, will we see a similar transition with AI in the next coming years as we saw 100 plus years ago with transportation, mainly cars? Another side fact about me, I mentioned I grew up around boats. I just grew up around stuff with motors. Like if I didn't have to work or anything, I think I would end up spending my time just like tinkering on a car or boat or something. I just find that fascinating. And so especially the car industry in general, when we went from horses and buggies to cars, like again, had Claude do a bunch of research on this and like to fact check some of my, I guess, guesses or understandings of it from my limited perspective, was like, that happens so much faster, I think, than we realize. Between like the first cars being available to all of a sudden, you know, millions of them on the road and people using them and not driving or riding horses anymore. I have to imagine in those early years, like there was the same resistance to trust. Like, you know, a horse is a living thing. You can give it food and know that it's healthy because it's walking well and all that. There's inherent trust that it'll get you there. But when you have these net new machines like cars, I trying to be empathetic for the people living in that time. I would have been like, I don't know, this like bucket of bolts exploding fire in a box in front of me feels like either it's going to explode me or it's not going to get me there because a bolt's going to come undone. Like, I don't think I can trust it. But then it's interesting how we as humans follow this like this trend of like, you know, what other people are doing. So we can get through trust much quicker when the masses suddenly adopt it, right? Like a really silly analogy is, I mean, you have a kid, right? If you've seen the movie Zootopia, it's a Disney movie. And even if you haven't, there's this scene in it where like one of the main characters early on is he runs like hustle operations to make money, and so like his main hustle is he buys these massive popsicles for cheap from the elephant part of town and then goes and melts them down and then freezes them into mini little popsicles and then resells them to all these mice in the mice part of town to make a profit. And it's seen as a hustle or whatever, but I think what's interesting is the part where it shows these like mice coming out of bank, mice, or maybe they're like hamsters, I don't know, doesn't matter. And then all they have to do is get attention of one. And then all of a sudden the full line follows all of them and they all just eat all the popsicles and then boom, it's all done. Like, look, savage take, but we are so that way as humans. Like, we are so like, well, everybody's doing this. Everybody's driving a car. Everybody's using the internet. Everybody's using AI. Like, is that going to be the forcing factor, you know, in some ways? I don't know. In one brain, yes, but I think there's this, for whatever reason, feels bigger. This feels like it has more gravity, more fear, more distrust inherently, especially like, sorry, a whole other tangent, but just like think about media alone or like movies, the amount of AI doom and gloom movies that have been put out in the last 10 years. For good reason. It's entertaining, I guess, but also it does spark emotion, right? All the way back to Terminator. Like, it's, I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think, sorry, to wrap it all up, I think my general take is this, in agreement of like, I think it's going to take time. I don't think it's going to go as fast as we think. I think it's the people that really adopt it the most and then show what's possible is the undetermined factor on like, if that part, if those group of people really share that openly and then start to scale and then many more people follow, then that could be, you know, a catalyst to the greater adoption of people, again, writing their own accounting software. Like, who knows, man? It changes so fast. And like, it's also amidst a world that is, I mean, let's be real, like kind of in turmoil right now, kind of on this like precipice across countries disagreeing and like all these things that it just feels unnerving, that, you know, the economies and world that we're living in. So time will tell.
I mean,
Yeah,
we live in, I think a lot of people kind of, including myself, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of people are perhaps overly positive and overly negative about the time that we live in right now. Things
totally.
are tough. Things are different. Things are more dynamic and changing and hard to navigate than possibly they've ever been. I'm not a historian, but
Yeah.
at the same time, things that we have access to are insane. And so I always look and I think like, if I wasn't born in this time, which is difficult and comes with its own problems, what would I be doing? Like I said, I started, building stuff for Roblox, then became a graphic designer for a prison and all that fun stuff. I'm here today in Italy, thinking and going with the type of person I am and the way that I learn and all this stuff. Like, what would my life have become if I was born in, an easier time, as some people would think? And so I am super grateful to be around in this time instead of any other point in history. And I have a question for you, very simple one. What do you have to say to the people? There are a lot of people out there who I think still, rightfully or wrong, I'm not going to share my opinion yet, who say AI is a fad today.
I empathized maybe a year or two ago. I think, obviously, to be clear, I'm biased. I, work at one of the major labs. I use Claude every single day for more and more things. And like, my personal take is that like, I think it's here to stay. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point, especially maybe even just tying into our more direct industry of like engineering, web development, design, all that is like, even just the last couple months, the amount of pretty prominent engineers, software developers, and such that have come out on social media, kind of just like, I think the way I make sense of it is like relinquishing or fully admitting that like they felt that way, and especially these people that these are like, when I say famous, I mean like the people that have like created some of the most adopted frameworks and ways of writing code today, right? React, Bun, whatever, have really come out to say that like I get it. I can't write code better and faster than AI at this point. That doesn't mean that they're like, I don't need to be I don't need to do what I do anymore. No, it's the vast majority of them are like excited once they get through that hole of like fear and see the potential and the power. They're like, oh my goodness, now I can ship a whole new framework in a month instead of 2 years or whatever. Like, even just to point like a very specific example for me that's close, I guess, in some realms of a niche of development is like in the Webflow community, I build and maintain Mast, which is a framework to help you build websites in Webflow in a consistent way, whatever. And that is not a novel concept to Webflow. Frameworks have existed in all different languages and things for years. And CSS specifically is, I learned on Bootstrap, whatever, and the hotness now is Tailwind. And if you saw some of the drama from a few weeks ago about like Adam, the founder of Tailwind, kind of coming out that, they were way down on revenue, like 80%. They had to let go 3 people, which was like 75% of their team. All this drama, feel for him, stoked that so many in the community came out to support and all that. But then part of the like underbelly of that was some drama around him like closing a PR to basically make like LMS, markdown accessible content for all their docs so that AI bots can understand it quicker and help people, create projects with Tailwind, which he saw it at the time was like taking away from their revenue potential of selling templates and all that, because people can just use AI to work with Tailwind for free. So I guess the way I understood that was like he was very apprehensive about AI in general. Fast forward to, I think it was this week, if not last, that I saw all of a sudden now he's like teasing some new, AI tool to help you build front ends. And I'm like, see, like, again, profound, I would say famous in the engineering world person went from screw AI, it's taking my business and making me fire people, to all of a sudden, wow, AI is incredible, I can build my own products and all that. And like, look, to be clear, there's probably more to that than I'm able to judge. I think it's just a recent example where I'm like, this is all shifting so fast. And I think it's pretty clear at this point, it's not just a fad. This is becoming so ingrained to our entire industry and is now having real impact. I mean, Julian, your own story of the member stack site migration, and then like even stuff you've been posting with Ship Studios, like so rad, right? And then at the same time, navigating, I know we talked about a little bit when we just chatted personally before, is just like, how does that then navigate into how we correlate to proper engineers that have been doing this for a long time, and how do we come alongside them and work in a more consistent way if at the end of the day we're all just prompting some AI or Claude to do it? Like, navigating that is wild, but I don't know, we'll figure it out as it comes, I suppose.
I think the time that we're in right now is so exciting for everyone. So a lot of people think, whether you're a software engineer and you're like, are like random people on my team going to be able to do my job for me or whatever you are, I'm going to share the story of how Ship Studio came to be super quickly. So long story short, we're talking, we come up with this idea and I'm like, I want to see if I can make a prototype for this. So I go ahead and I made a prototype. Actually, first, here's the thing. I started making it. I had my own assumptions. I'm like, oh, it's going to be like browser based. Anyone can just log in. It's going to work perfectly. And I spent like 8-10 hours sort of thing working on it and just, it wasn't going anywhere. Like I was running uphill entirely. Then I took a step back and I'm like, okay, clearly I'm approaching this wrong. Ended up realizing that this makes a lot more sense to be a desktop app. So in about 3 to 4 prompts, I had a better MVP than what took me like 10 hours in browser, which was so sick. So I keep working on it from like Friday to Sunday, Monday. And then I shared it with the team. And here at MemberStack, we have, developers, obviously. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, how is this going to go? I want to know what their thoughts are on the code. Because I'm using it. It works. But perhaps an engineer is going to look at this and be like, dude, this is going to break the second it like hits a real user. So I had no idea. I can read the code base, but there's a lot of imposter syndrome when it comes to being a, let's say, non-developer background, getting into developing with these tools. You think you can't do it and you can't. But anyways, so I send it to them. They look at it and they're like, yeah, this code is good. However, there are some things that I missed that aren't too good, and they're able to go over that and look at it. So since we launched Studio, the workflow has been this. I come up with ideas. They come up with ideas. We're all shipping to the same product at the same time. I'll come up with an idea and I'll sit here and go, I feel a little bit out of my depth. So I will push a change to the code base, let them know. They'll go take a look at it and be like, oh, I see what you're doing here. Here's how we can do it better. They fix it. And so we're working in the exact same way. But when you think about, let's say, traditional development workflow, it's like people will talk about a feature idea, then they'll hand it off to a designer. Designer will iterate. It goes back a few rounds of feedback. Then it gets handed off to the developer, a few more rounds of feedback. And then at the end, the designer changed their mind. They want something else. And it's like, now I'll come up with an idea and make it and done. Or I'll come up with an idea and be like, this is what I want, but it's not working too great. It happened the other day with Ship Studio. I wanted like multi-window support so you could work on a few projects at once. I did it, but it was buggy. And so I sent it to Josh and Tyler on the team, and they're like, they went in, made it better, and then released it. And that workflow is incredible. Like we're getting to a point where every single person on the team can contribute. But at the same time, your engineers like Josh and Tyler on our team, obviously you have a lot of engineers who have been looking at AI and they're just like, this concerns me, whatever it may be. Like they are needed. They are so useful for any larger, larger company, something that actually matters. Like without them, here's the thing, I'm going in blind. And so this workflow at this point, I mean, I'm just going to say, to put it simply, we're out shipping some companies that are worth a couple $2 billion just between the three of us, not to name any. But it's insane, dude. It's amazing. And the thing is, when I look back, literally 1 year ago, I was like, messing around with like GPT, using Wiz to build some web apps and stuff. My workflow, dude, has like entirely transformed in the past 365 days. People look and they're like, oh, a year. 365 days. I'm saying like the most stupid, obvious thing I've ever said in my life, but like, dude, 300, you go to bed, you wake up, that's 1 day. Multiply that by 365. My workflow time is completely different. So I want to know, can you take a look back and think like, what were you doing? Not, your work day to day, but like, what was your workflow like? Let's say you're a brand designer through and through. Like, what were you doing a year ago? What are you doing now?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. I think that the near past with like a year ago wasn't radically different. I would say a key difference was just like, purely in Webflow, building sites, still in Figma, here and there, especially on the team at Webflow. Yeah, so our brand web team, specifically that owned webflow.com, we were, 4 or 5 all designer developer combos. We didn't have separate, like we didn't have designers and then Webflow developers. Like we only ever hired people that did both. We just found that worked better. Although it was harder for hiring sometimes, it worked better for executing projects. And then I ended up managing that team my last year I was there. And so, between managing and then also just like spreading work around, I was in Figma less and less and less and more in Webflow and meetings and things more and more and more. Fast forward today, ironically, like on the team at Anthropic, we do have a couple just like mainly designers. They will still get in Webflow, do simple stuff. And then otherwise, like myself and a couple others are more intimately in Webflow very often. But then at the same time, I'm in code a lot more, either for custom stuff on top of Webflow, but then even also just tinkering and other things. Like we have another site, Insanity. And so I've been really excited to start to learn a lot more about how to use that. I've been working on rebuilding Mast in it just as an experiment of something I'm deeply familiar with, but in an environment I'm not, to see how that goes and gauge if it's good. And especially like, I think a detail you mentioned that really in the last year resonates a lot for me is also the very specific, that I think is a distinction many still brush over, especially in-house or like across engineering teams, is that like the stuff we can do with AI now is not just a prototype like it was a year ago. Like a year ago, even at Webflow, we had product designers prototyping the product internally, which was cool. But again, none of it was wired up. It was all just like clicking things. And even when you're like, whatever, AI, go make me a app, like a lot of the times the first thing you get feels real as a designer because you can actually click and it changes states and goes to pages, but like nothing was usually actually wired to a database or publishable or whatever. It had real authentication. Fast forward to today, like everything I've done in Sanity is real. Like it's not a prototype. I could literally go start building a site and publish it live today if I wanted to. And I think that's the part for me that's like, holy smokes. Like it's hard for me to even fully grasp that potential and that reality. And I think at the same time, just like also share it in a way confidently with those on my team or even other people that I'm friends with that are more engineers. And I just want to kind of like, hey, check out what I'm working on. Like, is this okay? Like you said, can you code review whatever? And I had Claude put together like a big markdown file of like a code review. Here's all the tech specs and all the things that it checked and qualified and reviewed against React best practices, etc. And it seems like it all checks out. I think there's still just this like apprehension and assumption from the last year of like, oh yeah, it looks great, it works when I do it, but like, is it actually like I still hear this term prototype being used, and I'm like, but it's not like it's real, even to your point of like you are actually contributing PRs that are maybe being refined, but they're still being merged. They're real features. So like, what does this mean when all of those things start to overlap? I think a broad thing for me is what you nailed, is that the engineers here on your team see things, but I think specifically they see things not just from the lens of however many lines of code is. They have a massive amount of context, which is, in my opinion, still, when I use Claude, the limiting, frustrating factor is like Claude, even though, yes, Claude can see my whole repo and all the code in it and all that, Claude is not in my brain. Claude does not understand, all the context of my team and all those things. And that, for me, recently is where my passion has like really been set on fire, almost back to like when I found Webflow, right? Like, I guess before I go down that hole quickly, the other thing I was going to note on this question is like, I think, I think I started using Webflow in like 2017 or 18-ish. And I found it, I was at a company that did like events and incentives for other companies. And so our design team operated like an agency. And so we'd build these like micro sites for events and campaigns and things. And it was always so cumbersome. It was the classic thing everybody experienced. Like I was a digital designer. I would design the site. I would hand it to a developer. We'd then ensue back and forth and head battering and like, no, 4 pixels does better. No, it doesn't. Like blah blah blah. And like then I would, out of frustration, I had already just dabbled in code at that point, but it really accelerated my passion to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript like to their core, just like to be super transparent, to prove them wrong, like to be like, no, I can do this, whatever it is. Here's the code, go do it. Like, because clearly you don't understand CSS or whatever. And again, that's a very not positive, savage way to think about it, but like that was my fuel. And then I found Webflow out of a research project of like, maybe there's tools we can do this better. And dude, that led to, then I was designing and building sites for clients, and then like it even led to one of our two developers that would help with those microsites was let go because we simply didn't need to. Like they also supported email. It was something I never would have wanted as the outcome, but like that was a transition I very viscerally experienced then, and then is giving me all the memories now because of, not, again, to be clear, especially now, I think in engineering, it is far less likely that we will see like full replacement for those that are fully leaning into it, like the people on your team and those like, instead, I think so many teams are recognizing the accelerant of it, right? And like, even when I mentioned movies and things earlier, one plug to go check out if it's at all interesting, even though I would definitely say don't watch this movie expecting it to be a good movie. It is very much a B movie, but I think the premise is powerful. There's a movie called Atlas. I think it's on Netflix with Jennifer Lopez in it. So like, known person. And long story short, it's a similar doom and gloom AI of like her mother creates AI and then actually like creates this humanoid robot and then finds a way to sync her brain as a child with the robot to help it advance its intelligence. It becomes aware of all the evil in the world and then therefore becomes evil and the world landslides or whatever. But then the glimmer of hope is that fast forward, humanity has found a way to reuse that linking ability, but in a way that is a 10x catalyst for us. So then like she ends up in this like mech robot that is, where she syncs fully with an AI bot, and then their combined ability of her limitless context and its awareness and intelligence to, recognize patterns in milliseconds is like all of a sudden, undefeatable. And like, again, so cheesy, but the underlying premise is so inspiring for me, and something I think about even just in these realms of, working with engineers more, or like us then being involved in that product lifecycle, or in the context of websites, like helping to build real stuff that like, look, it's just helping all of us. So like, how do we all just come together under that, and then also lean into the things we're most excited about and experienced with at the same time, right? Like your engineers and your team having that full context. And like, for me, that's the biggest part now in this day and age from a year ago, is like, okay, recognizing those things I don't have, that I'm limited on. I don't have experience with like scaling massive GitHub repos and dealing with like Git and PR workflows and CI reviews and all these like terms and things that, like, to be real, I have avoided like the plague for most of my career. That's why I love Webflow so much, is like, I don't have to think about all that. I make the change, I click publish, it's live. I don't have to deal with the drama and, potential friction of Git and all these other engineering toolings that, like, for me, have always felt like overdeveloped. Like why do I need all this for the small risk that a word goes out wrong? But guess what? I can just change again and republish. Like, it's not the end of the world. So I don't know. It's an exciting time. It's hard to make sense of, for sure.
It is. And man, back to what you said as well about like how it was a tool for prototyping, and that was really cool. That's all well and good. I don't think people have fully come to terms, and hopefully there's some, Webflow developers watching this who, here's the thing, guys, to all the Webflow developers watching this.
Yeah.
Another thing I understand is that you guys are, head down in client work. Like, you have a job to do, you have a client, deadlines, And that's why I really try to make these videos, because I understand how busy all these people are. I have the luxury of having a job where my job is to basically tinker with all this new stuff, so I have the luxury of being able to be at the front of the curve. They don't necessarily. And so a lot of people who haven't had the time to try out what AI has turned into, like, no longer just a prototyping tool. I got this email, and I made a tweet about it today, from a company, not going to say anything, whatever. I'm just trying to be nice. It's an AI building product, to say the least. And just to read it, it starts with, most AI vibe coding, with quotes around it, tools are great for demos, but they fall apart when real code components and workflows show up. I'm like, what? No, first of all, like that would have been a couple of years ago, but it just shows how many people will look at that and, believe that that's truly the case. That's not the case anymore. You can genuinely, truly build real production stuff. Guys, the marketing site that our company relies on, was entirely vibe coded. It's been live now for over a month. That's not a prototype. There's no aspect of prototype involved in that. And so
Totally.
people just need to understand that and go in whatever direction they want. I've got a question that I don't think anyone talks about. Basically, here's the thing, and a little backstory on my front. A lot of the Webflow community kind of like laughs at me for this when they find out. I don't even use Figma. I use Figma for logos, illustration, stuff like that.
Go.
I don't use Figma for UI design. I historically have just jumped straight into Webflow. And these days, I'm just jumping straight into Claude Code and working up something from scratch. But here's the thing. I started in design in Roblox, as I told you like 3 times now. But my career very quickly took a turn to, I guess, more like management and planning type roles. And so I would not sit here and try to tell you like I'm a great designer or anything like that. I try to avoid even referring to myself as a designer. And so for me, fine. I'm not building like, I'm not creating the most beautiful, unique designs ever to come up. So for me, jumping straight into Claude Code and designing and iterating works. How do you use AI in the design workflow? What people I think would love to hear. I would love to hear that.
So such a good question. I mean, I would start by saying, ironically, this is in some ways always been my hope, especially since finding Webflow. I remember having these feelings early on finding Webflow that there was so many things that felt familiar, like a Photoshop, especially at the time. I think like, because I kind of skipped the sketch phase. Like I went straight from like, I would design sites in Illustrator. I did Photoshop very early in my career, but then like I just liked vector and all that, and it felt more familiar. And I went mostly straight from Illustrator to Figma when Figma was like early. And even then, I remember being like, I just don't feel like I need this other than like editing a photo or making an asset. Like I feel like my passion has always been towards, can I just go to what you said, like straight into Webflow to do most of these things? And I think that ironically, a lot of the path that I felt was vital to nail in order to make that possible was the foundation, hence masked or using a framework or some starting point that I'm not truly starting from scratch, like building things in a way that is familiar and efficient and quick, that like I can get in and in a lot of ways stand up a simple page, or sometimes not simple, almost just as quick as I can in Figma from scratch, to be clear. But yet the result is a publishable page, right? I think the interesting part I found, though, and maybe this is more just from the lens of something I didn't say earlier, is I've freelanced on the side for quite a long time. Since joining the team at Anthropic, even to your point of having time to play with these tools, for me that was something I was trying to just be done. Again, 2 little kids. I'm getting older. I can't do that side gig thing forever. So I'm done freelancing, which has been very freeing, but at the same time, I still end up, again, just on my phone or whatever with Claude Code many of nights, because I'm like, I'd rather go build something and, tinker with toys than be doom scrolling on social or whatever, even though that still happens. But like, the point is that I'm still more fueled than ever to try to solve that or have that be part of my own workflows. Like, I don't need to mock something up in Figma. Why? Especially, I think a huge detail is like when you already have launched a site, you have established components, design systems, all that. Like, in my opinion, it's all the more reason that like you already have these building blocks over here. Why are we like building them here in Figma statically? And what I was going to say around the context of freelancing is like, the thing I found that is the hardest to solve in this question, or like, will we need Figma in the future, is actually not ourselves, it's who we work with. It's like the clients, the in-house marketing people, all that, they take longer to understand that potential. They are so much more familiar with, and are, especially like even in-house teams, I'd say most marketers I've ever worked with, only in the last couple of years, I've noticed most are now very comfortable getting in Figma, adding comments, maybe even editing text, stuff like that. And they almost like, again, not to stereotype, but I see a lot of them excited and confident. They're like, wow, I can like participate with designers in Figma. And then quickly I'm like, or just come over here in the CMS, again, Webflow, what have you, that like, we can just do the same thing in there. And even then, it just has taken it takes quite a bit of repetition and reminders and encouragement to get people into that mindset, so that then you can fully live in that mindset. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, we have portfolios or personal projects here and there, but like the vast majority of the work that we do, anybody that's making money professionally in this industry as like design, web development, etc., are only able to do that because of the clients that hire us or the teams we work on that pay us, right? And so like if they're not going to adopt that mentality, then it's going to be hard for us to do it. And so like I think if anything, I'm just like really keeping with it. I think the most recent take I have on this that I see as like another potential through hole is like, again, back to the point of like you have to have a solid design system framework set up, whether that's in Webflow or what have you. But then on top of that, how can I now use Claude to be very, very familiar through its what either skills, instructions, etc. of that design system, and have as much awareness and understand my intentions of implementing it or implementing pages with it as I would, and then using that as a vehicle to mock up pages really, really quickly or iterate on pages really, really quickly. Like I was trying to think of an analogy to this. I love metaphors that like there's so often this precious nature for us as like building web pages that like maybe is part of the inspiration of staying in Figma is like iteration. Well, in Figma I can just dupe, make edits, all that. Like even think about Framer, their update from last year of like they have design mode now so that you can have that freedom to design whatever. And I'm like, cool. Like I totally get the product direction and why people would be excited. But like, are we also so precious about like, other than maybe this is a biased take because of, I don't have to pay for Claude directly because of working there or whatever. But like, other than the cost to use Claude or some AI a bit more, what's to stop us from like, hey, we need a new page. Here's the content. Go build me 4 examples of it. Like, and I'll review all of them next to each other, just like I would have 4 different directions in Figma. Like, why not do that? Like, what feels so limiting by that other than, again, the cost to do it, which in a lot of ways you could argue the same thing in Figma. You're just paying somebody more time to go push pixels around in Figma to have the same result of like, I want to review examples, pick my favorite ones, combine them together, always is what ends up happening, and then ship the thing. And so like, I don't know, that's where I'm excited is like, I don't think that means that Figma is doomed or we won't use Figma. I think it's more just like, I think the teams that are pushing the edge of what these workflows are the ones that are going straight to code as quickly as they can. And yet the output is still very high quality, not just because the AI models are getting better and smarter, but also because they are instructing them. Like in the same way of the silly Atlas movie analogy is like, we still need to be there. We still need to be that infinite context window, that guiding light to empower the models to actually execute at a caliber that is indistinguishable from some human pushing all the pixels to make it look that way. And yet, like, I think a lot of people I've talked to or seen posts in socials is like, it feels like you said earlier, it's one or the other. They either assume that it's all slop. I don't really like that buzzword. I don't know why. It's like they just assume that no, there is no in between. You either like prompt it and it does everything, or and it's complete shit, or you have to do everything manually. It's like, no, like what if there's this mind melding world where we can do all of it, as we're already seeing with engineering, and we're just going to start seeing it also even more in design, even more in writing, all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I am so glad to hear you say that. That is my exact workflow. Like
Oh
a
man,
lot of people, they'll see something, yeah, that was generated with one prompt and be like, this is slop. Well, I mean, you're gonna get what you're gonna get with one prompt. When people are like,
totally.
dude, share the prompt that you made the member stack homepage with. I'm like, uh, how do you want that delivered? Like, do you want me to mail you a book? Like, I
Do you
spent
want a 7 GB zip?
literally, dude, like I
Dude,
spent,
this.
like 13, 14 hours just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But again, like you said, at the end of the day, what I get out of that is like shippable. It's publishable.
Oh,
It's not just
100%.
mine,
Yep.
final take from me on the whole like Figma side of things is, here's the thing. When you're developing, you inherently have guardrails. Guardrails or limitate, not really limitations, but you know what I mean? Like something that would be easy to do with CSS, for example. Whereas when you're in Figma, it's like you're only limited by your own eyes. And so when I'm working on something that really needs to be the most creative and well thought out thing, I'll still make like a little mock up in Figma. I'll never name my layers, no auto layout, none of that stuff. I don't see the point. But by the
Right.
time
Totally same.
and functional, dude, like I'm in Webflow, I'm working with Claude Code, and so man, I see the time here. I have one final question for you,
Love
similar
it.
topic, and that is visual editing. So I
Mm.
nobody has a good answer to this right now. You kind of have two workflows. You have like agentic, let's say working with Claude Code, and then you have visual development working with Webflow. I have tried numerous times to make visual editors, and I've succeeded a couple times, like visual editors for like, Tailwind and React. But every time I do, I stop using them and I'm like, I don't even need this. But at the same time, I do want it. So it's like,
Yeah.
what do you see? So you sent me agentation, by the way, and we'll play like what agentation is on the screen here. Super cool.
Yeah.
You click something, provide some context, and then paste it into whatever AI you're using. That is the best version for me of, let's say, a visual agentic workflow, to put it that way. Do you see that as like the final boss of working with agents visually, or do you see room for something which is visual? Like, what are your thoughts on that? I have literally no idea, so I'm interested.
Oh man, I'm gonna go metaphorical and deep, because that's, again, I just like thinking and seeing the world this way. This exact thought came about the other day of like, again, if we like try to back up as far as we can to our nature as human beings, like, although this is not unanimous, everybody has different abilities, to be clear, the vast majority of how we are created as humans and experience the world is our eyeballs, right? Or feeling things and smelling things, like our senses, right? And for me, at least, then that is a lot of the times, like you've heard the saying, believing is, or seeing is believing, right? Like that's not always the case, of course. But I think there's something of merit to that in this exact analogy of like, seeing and physically touching and clicking and doing something to a site is inherently trusting. It is something we know we did it. We made the change. We click publish. If somebody questions us on it, no, I saw it and therefore it is real, right? Like that is the way I think I've tried to make sense of this recently, is like, I don't, in so many ways, especially like what I mentioned, I've been dinking around Insanity and they have like visual editing and whatever. It's nowhere near as like, performant as Webflow, where you like instantly everything changes. But like, I've had so many of this like doubt and uncertainty of like, do we even need this? Like, at the end of the day, I just want to get to a point where I fully trust Claude to be like, Claude, here's what we got to update: pricing, this other about page, add this card, add this blog post, just give it all the things we have to do, link it to a doc. It just goes and does it. And I know for certainty, for the same level of certainty as watching it happen, that it's right. And I think that is a lot to ask of people to trust at this moment in time, right? Or at least, again, only speaking for myself, that I don't know if I'm there yet. Like, there's still the potential of hallucinations or whatever. And so that's where I come back to the visual editing of like, I still mostly my especially in this coming year, I really am excited about trying to find this like dream workflow of just like, again, what I just described: Claude, go make all these changes for me. Let me know when they're ready. I'll review them, right? Like, this is what engineers are already doing in the context of PRs, right? They get requirements. I've talked to many that I used to work with, for example, or in the community, that this is their life now. Is like, they feed a bunch of requirements to Claude or whatever. It goes and does them. They go to sleep. They wake up in the morning. They have 10 PRs to review. They iterate, make edits, and release or merge, right? Like, and so I want that so badly. But at the same time, I still want that visceral visual part of like reviewing what happened, or the inverse of like, back to the values and power of Webflows. Like, we had, even just to call somebody I adore in the community out, is like a little over a year ago, there was a Webflow, offsite or whatever, and we had some people from the community come and talk, and there was a couple on stage, and one of them was Matt Varghese, who runs 80/20, the agency. He just has the best takes, and him and a couple others were asked, "What's your favorite Webflow feature?" And he said the publish button. And that is ingrained in me now, because I couldn't agree more that, like, especially as I've used and built Webflow sites and maintained them alongside even like my current context on the team at Anthropic, where we have a site Insanity, we have a site in Webflow, or I've done this a lot with freelance client in the past, where like, the classic, I'm brought in to move the marketing site to Webflow because engineering doesn't want to maintain it anymore, but there's always still these launches that happen at the same time. So you can very clearly see the difference between something was broken, we got to fix something, it's emergency, get it out. And just the simplicity of Webflow being able to like, I just know where to go, I see it, click it, make the change, publish, done. And versus like, at least at this moment in time, go try to do the same thing, like simulate the same experience, even with Claude or any AI. And like, it will find it fast. It'll probably even make the change fast. But like, there is sometimes still that uncertainty of like, yeah, but it did accidentally do something else I didn't want it to do if I wasn't clear enough, or I was in such a hurry that I just like didn't give it a clear enough prompt. Like that, I think is that threshold that visual editing still is valuable in, is just the small things and the certainty, or just the other side of like, we've seen even like you said with the agitation is agentation, I don't know how to say it, or again like V0, Lovable, Bolt, all of them, Cursor has started baking in this like visual editing in the last year or more around, in different ways. Some of it's like click and give that to the prompt, some of it is literally like making the change and then behind the scenes it updates the code. The point is, I think all of them see that writing on the wall of like, people still want that certainty. They also, especially when it comes to refining design and like we were talking about replacing something like Figma for most things, then like you want that visual experience of refining those and not just like getting frustrated going in circles with the AI model. But I think that's the moment in time right now. I think if things keep going the way they're going, all the things you were just describing about the last year of like how different it is not fake anymore. This is all real stuff. And then at the same time, our ways of using these things advance, right? Like think about the last 2 months. And I'm sorry if a lot of this sounds like an echo chamber of like things I see on social, especially like X, which I was like trying to get off of and then feel like I'm sucked right back in because I just want to know what people are shipping for AI tools, is like all of the explosion of skills. Like, have you seen the Vercel skills directory that shipped? Actually, yes, because I saw your video about ShipStation. You get like, it's like 36,000 or something skills only in a matter of a few weeks of them curating these things and people submitting them. The point is that skills is a very real expression of what I was getting at earlier around like the Atlas equivalent or whatever. Is like, this is our way to really, steer these models in the ways we want to use them, because at the end of the day, they are general. And in theory, yes, they'll keep getting better. And that means the general nature of them will get more and more and more advanced. So you have to, in theory, guide them less. But I think forever, so much of the skills and all that is also not objective. It is subjective. It is things that we prefer, in the same way that like I am radically biased with CSS and how it's written. And like, I very much understand, especially now more than ever, why people love Tailwind. The more I've gotten into React and learned some of that, but like, I still have my strong preferences about, I like writing class names. I like clean, concise CSS syntax and reusing of classes and blah, blah, blah. But that is my preference. And I don't know that AI will ever get so, good and intimate at that unless there is some other path to do it that I just, we just haven't even thought of yet, or, or hasn't been shown yet. It's like, who knows? I think there's always going to be that nature of us. So I don't know, man. It's how many times have I said it now? It's like exciting times, but like it really is. It's so exciting that it's hard to even like step back every day and recognize what's happening before our eyes and take it also as like, is this real? Or is it a fad? Or people overhyping it? And it's like, I think you nailed it earlier. If you can carve out the time or share your experiences, which again, thank you, Julian, for sharing so much of what you're experiencing, for especially those that don't have the time to do it. Especially my previous freelancing on the side, I was there. I had no time to try these new tools. I just needed to do what I needed to do to execute, make money, and move on to the next project, right? So like, I think there's so much to try right now, and those that can get in there and do it and try it and be open and vulnerable to it not always going well, but learning something along the way is like, ironically, the thing we've always succeeded with as humans is like, yeah, failing and moving forward, but like it's more important now than ever, especially in our industry. So yeah.
Corey, this has been amazing. I have loved
Likewise.
every second of this. Honestly, I think this has been useful for me. You just gave me an idea there. One thing I want to mention and shout out that you said is the seeing is believing. That's the magic of visual editing. And we don't have that right now quite with Agentic, because it does something we're like, wait, but did you? And there are times where we look and check and it didn't. And so it leads to this distrust. So an idea for perhaps you, perhaps me, perhaps someone watching this building a tool is imagine if you made a change with the agent, and then instead of just seeing the code that changed, you could see. So it would be like before these things were touching. Now these things aren't touching. That's the magic that we need to capture. I don't know, and I want to talk to you more about that. That's its own conversation. This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Stoked. Thanks for having me.